The marble floor of the Ashworth mansion echoed beneath Robert's furious footsteps as he dragged Eliza by the arm through the sumptuous entrance hall. The young woman, with tears streaming down her face and a protective hand over her slightly protruding belly, stumbled over her own feet, trying to keep up with her fiancé's brutal pace. "How could you?" snapped Robert, his face contorted into a mask of fury that distorted his aristocratic features. "While I was traveling for work, you—" His voice trailed off, filled with venom that made Eliza shudder. "Robert, please, you're confused," Eliza begged, her voice shaking. "I would never— You know I would never—" It was at this moment that William Ashworth walked through the front door, his bag still in his hands after 3 months of absence in Seattle. The scene before him froze his blood. His twin brother, identical in appearance but so different in essence, mistreating the woman he had secretly loved since the first moment he saw her in the Boston Botanical Garden 2 years ago. "Robert!" William's voice thundered through the hall, making them both turn around. The shock on Eliza's face was instantaneous, her wide green eyes darting between the two identical brothers. "William?" The confusion in his voice was palpable, mixed with something else, a horrified realization that was beginning to form. Robert let go of Eliza's arm as if he had been burned, taking a few steps back. His face, once contorted with anger, now wore a mask of mock indignation. "Glad you're back, brother. Now you can see for yourself the betrayal under our own roof." William let his bags fall to the floor with a thud, his eyes fixed on Eliza, who looked like she was about to faint. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place in his mind. The strange calls he had received during his trip, the confusing messages from Eliza asking about dates that never happened. "What did you do, Robert?" William's voice was low, dangerous, filled with an understanding that made her stomach turn. Eliza staggered, supporting herself against a marble column. You... His words came out choppy as he looked at Robert. "All this time, the meetings in the garden, the conversations at night, were you pretending to be William?" The silence that followed was deafening. Robert stood erect, his chin lifted in defiance. "Don't be ridiculous. You're trying to divert attention from your own infidelity." William took a step forward, his fists clenched. "While I was in Seattle, closing our company's biggest contract, you were here, manipulating the woman you supposedly love, pretending to be me?" The Ashworth mansion, with its mahogany-paneled walls and prized artwork, seemed to suffocate with the tension that filled the air. The three remained in a triangle of raw emotions: love, betrayal, manipulation, and long-buried truths, threatening to surface. "You always wanted her for yourself," Robert said finally, his voice thick with bitterness. "From the beginning. Do you think I didn't notice the way I looked at her? How she was always there, being the perfect brother, the trustworthy friend?" William felt his heart tighten. It was true. He had always loved Eliza silently, respecting her choice for Robert, keeping his feelings locked away in a deep place in his soul. But never, not even in his darkest moments, had he considered betraying the trust of his brother or Eliza. "And your solution was this," William gestured in disgust. "Manipulate, lie, play with her feelings." Eliza sobbed silently, one hand still on her belly. The realization of the extent of Robert's manipulation seemed to have left her in a state of shock. "The baby," she whispered. Her words fell like lightning in the mansion's hall. William felt the air leave his lungs, while Robert visibly paled. 3 months, Eliza continued, her voice gaining strength. "You made me believe. You made me think." She couldn't finish, the words trailing off in an anguished sob. William crossed the distance to her in 3 long strides, placing himself between her and Robert like a shield. "You are going to leave this house now," he told his brother, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "This is my home as much as yours," Robert growled, but there was a tremor in his voice, an uncertainty that betrayed his bravado. "Not after this," William replied, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "Not when the company's lawyers know you impersonated me during business negotiations. How many contracts have you signed in my name, Robert? How many decisions have you made impersonating me?" Robert's face lost the last of its color. The legal implications of his actions were beginning to weigh heavily on his shoulders, and William could see the exact moment his brother realized he had gone too far. "Eliza," William said softly, turning to her without completely taking his eyes off Robert. "You're not alone. I promise." She looked up at him, her green eyes bright with tears, but there was a strength rising there, a determination rising from the ashes of her betrayed trust. "I trusted him," she said simply. "I trusted you too." Her words hit William like a punch in the gut. She was right. Even if indirectly, her silence, her inability to confess her true feelings, had contributed to this situation. Robert took one last look at the two of them before turning and heading up the stairs, his heavy footsteps echoing through the mansion. The sound of a door slamming upstairs was like an endpoint in a story that was just beginning to unfold. William and Eliza remained in the hall, separated by yards of polished marble and years of unspoken truths. The Boston afternoon sun streamed in through the tall windows, casting elongated shadows that seemed to dance around them, silent witnesses to a moment that would change their lives forever. 3 days after the confrontation at Ashworth Manor, William met Eliza at the Little Bluebells Cafe in the heart of Cambridge. The establishment, with its exposed brick walls and hanging plants, offered the discretion they both needed. Through the foggy window, January snow fell softly onto the historic streets of Massachusetts. "You look tired," William said gently, noticing the dark circles under the green eyes that so enchanted him. Eliza wrapped her hands around the teacup, seeking warmth. "I can't sleep. I keep reliving every moment, every conversation." She paused, swallowing hard. "How could I not notice?" "Robert has always been an excellent manipulator," William replied, fighting the bitterness in his voice. "Ever since we were children, he managed to convince our parents that I had broken the porcelain vases he knocked over." A sad smile played on Eliza's lips. "But this is different, William. He didn't just lie. He stole months of our lives. His voice trailed off, a hand instinctively resting on his stomach. William felt his heart tighten. The baby's paternity was a question that hung over them like a dark cloud. "Eliza, I need to tell you something," he began, his pulse quickening. "That night in the mansion's conservatory, 3 months ago. When I thought it was you. Show me the rare orchids," Eliza added, her face turning pale. "I was in Seattle that night, closing the deal with Pacific Tech." William took a deep breath, facing the pain in her eyes. "Robert must have found out about my private orchid collection and used it to seduce me," Eliza finished, her voice breaking, "pretending to be you." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with painful revelations and irreversible consequences. A waitress came over to refill their cups, unaware of the palpable tension between the two. "Why would he do that?" Eliza finally asked, more to herself than to William. "Why go to all this elaborate lying?" William adjusted his tie, a nervous habit he had developed over the years. "Robert was always competitive. Ever since we were little, he needed to prove that he could have everything I had. But this time—" He hesitated, knowing that the next confession would change everything. "This time?" "He found out about my feelings for you," William admitted, the words coming out as a painful whisper. "He found my diary in the office, where I wrote about how I felt since that first meeting in the botanical gardens." Eliza caught her breath, her eyes widening at the revelation. "All this time?" William nodded, unable to look away. "I never said anything because you chose him. I respected your decision. I buried my feelings as deep as I could." "But Robert found out," Eliza concluded, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. "And he decided that the best revenge would be—" Making me lose you twice, William finished bitterly. First for him, and now. The sound of a cup breaking on the next table brought them back to the reality of the cafe. Eliza wiped away a lone tear that ran down her cheek. I need time, William, she said softly. I need to process all of this. The baby, the lies, your feelings. It's a lot. William nodded, respecting the silent request for space. I rented you an apartment in Back Bay, he said, sliding an envelope across the table. It's safe, discreet, and close to the hospital where you work. It's not charity, he added quickly, seeing the hesitation in her eyes. It's the least I can do after my own brother. Thank you, Eliza interrupted, taking the envelope with trembling fingers. Not just for the apartment, but for being here, for being honest with me now. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Cambridge with a white blanket that seemed to want to erase the traces of the past. But some marks, William knew, were too deep to be erased. I'm going to sue Robert, he said finally, not just for what he did to you, but for the contracts he signed in my name. The lawyers are already preparing the documentation. Eliza nodded slowly. He needs to face the consequences of his actions, she agreed, her voice firmer. But William, what happens to us now? The question hovered between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities and fears. William looked at the woman he had loved silently for so long, now carrying a child that could be his brother's, and felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. That's up to you, Eliza, he replied softly. It always depended. She reached across the table, lightly touching his fingers. The contact, although brief, sent shivers down her spine. I need to find out who I am without Robert's lies, she said. I need to be sure that my feelings are real, not just reflections of elaborate manipulation. William understood. In fact, he had always understood Eliza better than his own brother. It was one of the reasons why his love for her had grown so deeply over the years. I'll be here, he promised, not as a reflection of what Robert pretended to be, but as myself. I was always just myself with you, Eliza. The snow continued its gentle dance outside, and inside the Bluebells Cafe, two wounded souls began to glimpse a path through the pain toward the truth. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since the confrontation at the mansion, there was a spark of hope shining among the shadows of the past. The sound of the intercom brought William out of his thoughts as he reviewed documents in his office at Ashworth Enterprises. The face of his legal assistant, Nathan Pierce, appeared on the screen. Mr. Ashworth, we found something you need to see immediately. Minutes later, Nathan entered with a red folder, his normally composed face betraying concern. We discovered a series of suspicious transactions during your absence. Robert didn't just impersonate you in meetings. He diverted significant funds to an account in the Cayman Islands. William felt his blood run cold in his veins. The implications were much worse than I imagined. As? Almost $2 million, Nathan replied, spreading documents out on the mahogany desk. And there's more. We found correspondence between him and a private investigator. Robert had been monitoring you and Eliza for months. The revelation hit William like a punch in the stomach. His eyes quickly scanned the photos that Nathan had, him and Eliza, in seemingly casual conversations in the mansion's garden, occasional lunches at the hospital where she worked, even the time he helped her with a flat tire on a rainy afternoon. He was building a case, William murmured, realization hitting him, trying to prove there was something between us, even when there wasn't. William's phone vibrated. It was a message from Eliza. I need to see you. Massachusetts General Hospital, 3 p.m. It's urgent. 3 hours later, William found Eliza in the doctor's break room. She held a manila envelope with the hospital logo on it, her fingers shaking slightly. I took the DNA test, she said without preamble, her voice low but firm. Using a sample of your hair that I found at the mansion before I left. The baby is Robert's. William closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the impact. Part of him had hoped, wished that the baby was the result of Robert's manipulation by pretending to be him. It would be a connection, even if it was born of a lie. "It doesn't change anything about how I feel," he said softly, taking a step towards her. "It changes everything," Eliza replied, silent tears streaming down her face. "Because now I know that every moment I thought was special with you was actually with him. Every confidence, every laugh shared." "Not all of them," William interrupted gently. "Remember that afternoon at the botanical garden when you were researching your paper on medicinal plants? It was really me, just like the day your car broke down in the storm." Eliza blinked, confused. "Like you?" William took his phone out of his pocket, showing the photos Nathan had given him earlier. "Robert monitored us. Every genuine moment we shared, he recorded and distorted for his own ends." "He is the father of my child," Eliza whispered, her voice breaking. "The man who manipulated and lied to us all will be part of my life forever now." William approached cautiously, respecting her space but wanting to offer comfort. "You're not alone in this, Eliza. Neither you nor the baby." "How can I trust anyone again?" she asked, her green eyes searching his. "How can I look at you and not wonder if it's really you?" "Because I never had to pretend to be someone else with you," William replied softly. "Every word, every gesture of mine has always been authentic. Even now, when I say that, regardless of this test, I want to be by your side." Eliza's beeper sounded, reminding her of her responsibilities at the hospital. "I need to get back to work," she said, wiping away tears. "But William, thank you for being honest with me, even when the truth hurts." As Eliza walked away down the hospital corridor, William felt the weight of the documents in his pocket, evidence of the extent of Robert's betrayal. His brother hadn't just manipulated emotions, had put at risk everything the Ashworth family had built for generations. His phone vibrated again. It was Nathan with more news. Robert had been seen boarding a flight to the Cayman Islands that morning. The race against time to stop him from escaping with the embezzled money was just beginning. William looked one last time at the hallway where Eliza had disappeared, his heart torn between chasing his brother and protecting the woman he loved. But maybe, for the first time since this whole story began, he didn't have to choose. "I could do both, seek justice and build trust, one day at a time." Stepping out of the hospital into the cold Boston afternoon, William made a connection. "Nathan, prepare the documents to freeze all accounts in Cayman and schedule a board meeting for tomorrow. It's time for everyone to know the truth about Robert Ashworth." William stared out the window of his Beacon Hill penthouse at the Boston skyline, the city skyline reflecting the setting sun in shades of gold and crimson. His phone kept buzzing with updates from Nathan on the hunt for Robert in the Cayman Islands, but his mind was focused elsewhere, on the envelope he had just received by special courier. Inside, old photos of the Ashworth family revealed a story he had never imagined. In one of them, dated 25 years ago, her father, Harrison Ashworth, appeared alongside an unknown woman in a cafe in Newport. On the back, a handwritten note. "She needs to disappear. The test proves everything." "You had your secrets too, didn't you, Dad?" William muttered, spreading out more photos on his work desk. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Catherine Monroe, the former housekeeper of Ashworth Manor, who he had summoned after discovering the photos. "Miss Monroe," William greeted her, noting how she seemed to have aged since the last time he saw her. "I appreciate you coming. After 30 years of serving your family, how could you refuse?" she replied, her blue-grey eyes landing on the photos on the table. His face visibly paled. "Do you recognize this woman?" William asked softly, pointing to the photo of the cafe. Catherine sat heavily in a leather armchair. "Rebecca Mills," she whispered, "your biological mother." The revelation hit William like a bolt of lightning. "What do you mean, biological mother?" "Diana Ashworth is our mother." "Diana is Robert's mother," Catherine explained, her hands shaking slightly. "Rebecca was a scientist who worked with her father on developing medical technology. They fell in love, but Harrison was already married to Diana." William poured himself a drink, offering another to the housekeeper, who gratefully accepted. Continue. Rebecca got pregnant. Harrison promised to leave Diana, but when he found out they were twins... Catherine took a sip of her drink. Diana was pregnant too, with Robert. Harrison saw an opportunity. He paid Rebecca to hand over one of the babies, you, and disappear. My God, William murmured, his mind processing the enormity of the revelation. Aren't Robert and I real twins? No, you were born on the same day, to different mothers. Harrison orchestrated everything, forged documents. Diana never knew. She believed she had given birth to twins. William's phone vibrated again, a message from Eliza. I found out something about Robert. I need to see you urgently. Why are you telling me this now? William asked the housekeeper. Because Robert found out the truth 6 months ago, Catherine replied. He found the same documents as you, but instead of looking for answers, he began planning his revenge, not just against you, but against the entire Ashworth family. The pieces began to fall into place, the embezzlement of money, the manipulation of Eliza. Everything was part of a larger plan of destruction. Where is Rebecca now? William asked, fearing the answer. Died 5 years ago in a car accident in Providence. Catherine looked at him significantly. At least, that's the official story. William picked up his coat, his mind already drawing connections. I need to find Eliza. Something tells me that what she discovered is connected to all of this. William, Catherine called after he was at the door, there's one more thing. Rebecca left you something in case the truth came out. She took a flash drive out of her bag. All the records of the research she and Harrison did. Research worth billions today. In the elevator, descending the 20 floors of his building, William tried to process all the revelations. His phone vibrated once again. Nathan had located Robert in Grand Cayman, staying under an assumed name at the Ritz-Carlton. Eliza waited for him in the Harvard Medical School courtyard, her face pale in the early evening lights. William, you need to see this, she said without preamble, handing him a folder. I found it in the hospital files. Robert wasn't just impersonating you, he was replicating a pattern. Inside the folder, newspaper articles from 25 years ago detailed a familiar story. Separated twins, a missing scientist, millions in revolutionary medical research. History repeating itself, William murmured, sharing with Eliza what he had just discovered from Catherine. It's no coincidence that Robert chose me, Eliza said softly. I work in the same research department where his birth mother made her discoveries. He knew that eventually I would find the connections. The Boston night felt colder suddenly, the biting winter wind carrying promises of snow. William looked at Eliza, the woman he loved, now entwined in a web of lies and betrayal that spanned decades. We need to stop Robert, she continued, not just for the money he stole, but for what he plans to do with Rebecca's research. He wants to destroy everything, the company, the family's reputation, their legacy. William nodded, feeling the weight of the flash drive in his pocket. It's not just about money or revenge now. It's about the truth. All the truths. Snow was beginning to fall over Boston when William parked his Tesla Model S in front of Massachusetts General Hospital. Rebecca's flash drive metaphorically burned in his pocket as he crossed the parking lot toward the research laboratory, where Eliza was waiting for a discovery that promised to change everything. I found something in the old files, Eliza said, as he entered, her green eyes flashing with urgency. In front of him, spread out on the laboratory bench, several documents yellowed with age told a dark story. Rebecca's research wasn't just about medical advances. She was developing a revolutionary method of gene therapy. William looked over the documents, his heart racing as he recognized the elegant handwriting of his newfound biological mother. That explains why it's worth billions, he muttered. More than that, Eliza continued, flipping through the pages until she reached a specific report. Rebecca discovered how to reverse certain fatal genetic conditions, the kind of discovery that would change medicine forever. But Harrison... She hesitated, looking at William with compassion. Harrison silenced her, William added, anger rising in his chest. Not only did he steal one of his children, but also his life's work. A noise in the hallway made them turn sharply. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his normally composed face showing signs of concern. "William, Robert just made a massive transfer. We couldn't block it in time." "As?" William asked, already fearing the answer. 50 million, but that's not the worst." Nathan entered the laboratory, closing the door behind him. He sent an email to all the major shareholders of Ashworth Enterprises. It's exposing everything. The truth about you and him, the stolen research, Harrison's involvement. Eliza gasped, one hand instinctively going to her belly. "He's destroying everything." "No," William said firmly. "He's trying to force us to play on his terms. Robert has always been calculating. This is bait." Eliza's phone rang. An unknown number. She put it on speakerphone. "Hello, darling," Robert's voice sounded, filled with false concern. "I hope you and my dear brother are enjoying your discoveries about the past, but there is something you still don't know." William clenched his fists, controlling his anger. "What do you want, Robert?" "I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything, William, just like I did when I discovered my entire life was a lie." Robert's voice became harder. "Rebecca's research? It's just the tip of the iceberg. Harrison didn't just steal her work. He built an empire on the bodies of dozens of patients who died in unauthorized tests." Eliza paled, recognizing the implications. As a doctor, she understood the horror of what Robert was suggesting. "Do you have proof of this?" William asked, his mind already calculating the ramifications. "I have something better," Robert replied with an audible smile in his voice. "I have a living witness. Someone Harrison couldn't completely silence." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan was frantically checking his tablet, probably trying to track the call. "Rebecca didn't die in that accident," Robert continued. "Harrison has kept her hidden all these years, in a private clinic in Vermont, sedated, but alive, his insurance against any exposure." William felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Was his biological mother, the woman he had just discovered, still alive? "Now you have a choice," Robert said, his voice taking on a tone of false generosity. "You can try to stop me from exposing everything, or you can try to save Rebecca before Harrison finds out that you know the truth, but you can't do both." The call dropped, leaving the three of them in heavy silence. "He's bluffing," Nathan said, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. "No, it's not," Eliza replied, quickly fiddling with her computer. "Look at this." She opened a series of medical records. "There is a patient at a private clinic in Burlington, Vermont, admitted 5 years ago under the name Jane Smith, but her DNA," she looked at William, "partially matches yours." William felt a wave of contradictory emotions: hope, anger, fear. "Nathan, keep tracking Robert and the money. Eliza." He hesitated, looking at the woman carrying his brother's child. "You don't need to get involved in this anymore." "I've been involved since the moment Robert chose me as part of his plan," she replied firmly. "Besides, I'm a doctor. If your mother is being kept sedated against her will, I need to help." The sound of footsteps in the hallway alerted them. Through the frosted glass of the laboratory door, they saw the unmistakable silhouette of Harrison Ashworth approaching. "Quickly," William whispered, putting away the documents. "Through the emergency exit." As they escaped through the service stairs, William knew they were entering a much more dangerous game than they imagined. The truth about his origins was just the beginning. There were decades of secrets and crimes waiting to be revealed. And in the middle of it all, there was Eliza, carrying not only Robert's son, but also the weight of discoveries that could change the future of medicine. William looked at her as they walked down the stairs, admiring her strength and determination, and silently promised that this time he wouldn't let anyone hurt her. Not Robert, not Harrison, not the ghosts of the past that now haunted them. The distant siren of an ambulance echoed through the snow-covered streets of Boston as William, Eliza, and Nathan took refuge in an inconspicuous cafe in the South End, 3 blocks from the hospital. The place, with its yellowish lighting and sparse clientele, offered the perfect shelter for them to process the bombastic revelations of the last few hours. "I've gained access to the clinic's records in Burlington," Nathan announced, rotating his laptop so the others could see. "Jane Smith receives regular visits from a private doctor every 3 days. Guess who signs the treatment authorizations?" "Harrison," William replied, his voice thick with bitterness. He studied the familiar signature on the scanned document, the same one he had seen on countless corporate contracts over the years. Eliza, who was monitoring her own tablet, let out a muffled exclamation. "I found something in the hospital's old archives. Rebecca's research. It wasn't just about conventional gene therapy. She was developing a method to correct specific mutations during pregnancy." "What does that mean exactly?" Nathan asked, frowning. "It means she could have revolutionized the treatment of serious genetic diseases," Eliza explained, her green eyes shining with a mix of professional admiration and horror. "But the experimental methods, some of them appear to have been tested on patients without adequate consent." William felt his stomach drop. "Harrison used her work to build the Ashworth Enterprises pharmaceutical empire." "And now Robert has proof of all this," Nathan added, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "The transfers he made were not just to accounts in the Caymans. Some of the money went to an account in Burlington, Vermont." "He's preparing something," William murmured, connecting the dots. The exposure of the email to shareholders, the revelation about Rebecca being alive, it's all part of a bigger plan. A group of resident doctors entered the cafe, instinctively causing the three of them to lower their voices. Eliza placed a protective hand on her stomach, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by William. "I can't let this history repeat itself," she said softly. "This baby, he deserves to be born into a world where the truth prevails, not buried under decades of lies and manipulation." William covered her hand with his, a gesture of comfort and solidarity that made her heart race. "We're going to expose everything, Eliza, but we need to outsmart Robert. He wants to force us to choose between stopping him and saving Rebecca, but maybe we can do both." "As?" Nathan asked, already typing furiously on his laptop. "Robert was always methodical in his plans," William explained, years of being with his brother giving him valuable insights. "He wouldn't leave Rebecca unprotected while he exacts his revenge. There must be a system, a protocol." "Wait," Eliza interrupted, her fingers quickly swiping across the screen of her tablet. "The medical records show a pattern. The private doctor's visits always happen at the same times, for the same duration. It's almost like a dosage schedule," William added, realization hitting him. "They keep her sedated through an automated system. If we could access—" "I'm already on it," Nathan announced, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "The clinic uses a digitalized medication administration system. If we can get access—" A notification sound on William's cell phone interrupted them. It was a message from Robert. "Tick-tock, little brother. Harrison is already on his way to Burlington. How long do you think Rebecca has when he finds out you know the truth?" "We need to split up," William decided, his protective instinct kicking in. "Nathan, continue tracking the money and try to access the clinic system. Eliza—" He hesitated, knowing the risk he was about to suggest. "I'm going with you to Burlington," she declared before he could continue. "I'm a doctor, William. If Rebecca is being kept under sedation for so long, she's going to need specialized medical care when we release her." "It's dangerous," he protested, even though he knew she was right. "Everything about this situation is dangerous," she replied with a sad smile. "Besides, after everything we discovered, I think I owe it to Rebecca. Her work could have saved so many lives." The barista announced he was closing, bringing them back to the reality of the moment. Outside, the snow had thickened, transforming Boston into an almost ethereal landscape. "I have a private jet at Logan International," William said, already pulling out his phone to make arrangements. "We can be in Burlington in less than an hour." "Keep your phones on," Nathan instructed, beginning to put away his equipment. "And William, be careful. Robert may be playing a much more complex game than we realize." As they left the cafe, William couldn't help but notice how Eliza instinctively approached him when a gust of cold wind hit them. Despite all the madness that surrounded them, despite the baby she was carrying being Robert's, his feelings for her had only grown. "We'll get your mother back," Eliza promised softly, as if reading his thoughts. "And then, let's fix this all. Together." William nodded, guiding her toward the car as the first snowflakes began to fall more heavily over Boston. The race against time had begun, and the fate of 3 generations of the Ashworth family hung in the balance. The private jet cut through the night sky toward Burlington, leaving behind the twinkling lights of Boston. William watched Eliza, who had slept briefly after takeoff, her face revealing the exhaustion of the last few hours. His phone vibrated silently, a message from Nathan with precise coordinates of the clinic and a disturbing discovery. "Eliza," he called softly, touching her shoulder. She woke up instantly, her doctor instincts always alert. "Nathan found something. The clinic isn't just a medical facility. It's a former Ashworth property." "What?" Eliza sat up straight in her seat, fully awake now. "Harrison has had Rebecca prisoner on his own property this entire time. Apparently the clinic was converted from an old family vacation home," William explained, showing him the floor plans Nathan had sent. "Which means Robert probably knows every in and out of the place." The pilot announced that they would begin the descent in 15 minutes. The snow was falling heaviest in Vermont, creating a white veil across the aircraft windows. "I got access to the full medical records," Eliza said, checking her tablet. "The sedation protocol is complex, designed specifically to keep the patient conscious enough for basic functions, but incapable of clear communication or meaningful movement." William felt his stomach drop. For 25 years... "Not just that," Eliza continued, her voice shaking slightly. "The records show periodic attempts to extract information from her, about her research, her methods. Harrison never gave up trying to discover all the secrets of her work." The jet landed smoothly at Burlington Airport, where a car was already waiting. As they drove through the city's snowy streets, William received another message, this time from Robert. "Harrison arrived at the clinic 10 minutes ago. Let the show begin." "It's a trap," Eliza said, reading the message over William's shoulder. "Robert wants all 3 in the same place." "Yes," William agreed, making a sharp turn. "But he forgot something important. Now we know who we really are. And most importantly," he glanced briefly at Eliza, "we know who we want to be." The clinic emerged from the snow like a haunted Victorian mansion, its bright windows casting unsettling shadows across the white-covered grounds. William parked discreetly at the back of the property, where Nathan had indicated a less guarded service entrance. "The security system is compromised," William reported, checking his phone. "Nathan got a 15-minute loop on the cameras. That's all the time we have." Eliza adjusted the medical bag she had brought, her years of emergency residency preparing her for any scenario. "4th floor, East Wing," she recited, memorizing the plan. "The medication delivery system is controlled from a central station on the 3rd floor." They moved silently through the dimly lit hallways, each step calculated. The characteristic hospital smell mixed with something older, aged wood and secrets kept for decades. On the 3rd floor, they encountered the first complication: 2 security guards stationed in front of the medical control station. "Distraction," Eliza whispered. William nodded, taking out a small device from his pocket. Another gift from Nathan. With a click, the sprinklers in the opposite hallway went off, sending security guards to investigate. Eliza moved quickly to the main computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm gradually reducing the sedation. We can't stop it abruptly. It would be dangerous after so long." A noise of raised voices reached them, coming from the upper floor. "Harrison," William murmured, recognizing his adoptive father's authoritative voice. "And Robert." "You can't do that," Harrison's voice echoed. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Ah, I understand perfectly." Robert's response sounded full of bitterness. "I understand that you destroyed lives to build your empire, and now everyone will know." William and Eliza looked at each other, mutual understanding passing between them without the need for words. While she finalized the adjustments to the medication system, they headed for the stairs. Rebecca's room was at the end of the hall, a white, seemingly ordinary door hiding 2.5 decades of institutionalized cruelty. William felt his heart accelerate as he turned the doorknob. There, lying in a comfortable-looking hospital bed, was the woman in the photographs, older, paler, but unmistakably her biological mother. His eyes, so similar to his, slowly opened as Eliza began to check his vitals. And then, for the first time in 25 years, Rebecca Mills spoke to her son. "I knew you would come," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I dreamed of this moment." The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway alerted them. The final confrontation was about to begin. William positioned himself protectively between the door and the bed, while Eliza continued to monitor Rebecca's vitals. "What do we do now?" Eliza asked, her hand finding William's in the dark. "Now," he replied, gently squeezing her fingers, "we rewrite the history of the Ashworth family, starting with the truth." The bedroom door opened violently, revealing Harrison Ashworth and Robert in a confrontational stance. The frigid Vermont air entered the room, making Rebecca shiver slightly in her hospital bed. "Get away from her," Harrison ordered, his authoritative voice echoing through the room. His eyes, normally calculating, now revealed a mix of anger and fear as he saw his decades-old secret exposed. "No," William replied firmly, maintaining his protective stance. "It's over, Harrison. All the lies, all the manipulations, it's over." Robert remained a few steps behind, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "What a touching family reunion," he scoffed. "Lost son finally finds his real mother. Too bad he was too late to save her research." Eliza, still monitoring Rebecca's vitals, noticed a sudden change in her heart monitor. "She's reacting to stress," he warned. "We need to remain calm." "Calm?" Harrison took a step forward. "You have no idea what's at stake here. Rebecca's research, the potential to save lives," Rebecca interrupted, her voice weak but determined. "Not to build fortunes on the suffering of innocents." William felt a chill when he heard his biological mother's voice defending her principles even after years of captivity. Eliza squeezed his arm gently, a silent gesture of support. "The original files," Robert announced, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "All the research, all the unauthorized testing, all the deaths you tried to cover up, Harrison. It's all here." Harrison visibly paled. "You don't understand. Those deaths were necessary for progress, to create treatments that would save millions." "There was nothing noble about your actions," Rebecca countered, trying to sit up with Eliza's help. "You stole my job, my son, my life, all in the name of profit." William watched the dynamic unfold, realizing that Robert had orchestrated this moment meticulously. "Why now, Robert? Why expose all this after so long?" Robert laughed bitterly. "Because I finally understood that I was never a real Ashworth. I was just a convenient pawn in Harrison's game, the perfect surrogate son to keep up appearances while he built his empire on lies." "And Eliza?" William questioned, his voice hardening. "Why involve her in your revenge?" "Because she works in the same department where it all started," Robert replied, his eyes locking onto the doctor. "The perfect place to plant the seeds that would eventually expose the whole truth. And you, William, always so noble, so protective. I knew I wouldn't resist when I found out she was pregnant." Eliza stepped forward, her professional presence masking her own emotional turmoil. "You used your own son as a pawn in your revenge game." "This baby is the only true thing in this whole story," Robert replied, a flash of vulnerability crossing his face. Harrison, taking advantage of the distraction of the conversation, suddenly moved towards Rebecca, but William quickly intercepted him. "Not anymore," he declared, holding the arm of the man who had raised him. "You won't hurt her again." "You're my son," Harrison argued, desperation tinging his voice. "I created you. I gave you everything." "You stole from me," William corrected. It stole my true identity, my chance to know my mother, my heritage. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Nathan had called the authorities as per plan. Robert smiled, satisfied. "Looks like our time is up, Dad." "The files," Harrison pleaded, turning to Robert. "At least let me—" "Too late," Robert interrupted, tossing the flash drive to William. "I've already sent copies to every major media outlet in the country. In a few hours, the Ashworth empire will be just a tarnished memory." Eliza, still next to Rebecca, noticed that the snow began to fall more intensely through the window, as if nature itself wanted to cover the sins of the past with its white cloak. "We need to get Rebecca out of here," she said. "She needs proper medical care." William nodded, but before he could respond, Harrison made a desperate move toward the door. Robert, surprisingly, was the one who stopped him. "It's over, Dad," he said, holding the older man. "It's time to face the consequences." The sirens were closer now, and blue and red lights were starting to dance on the bedroom walls through the window. William looked at his biological mother, then at Eliza, and finally at his non-twin brother. Decades of lies were about to come to light, and with them, the chance for a new beginning, for all of them. "Come on," he said softly, helping Rebecca to her feet with Eliza's assistance. "It's time to tell our story, the real story." The sound of sirens filled the frigid Burlington air as police and FBI agents swarmed the Ashworths' former property. William watched from the hospital room window as Harrison was handcuffed and escorted through the snow, his imposing figure now dwarfed and defeated. "The files are safe," Nathan reported over the phone. "All the evidence of the illegal experiments, the financial transfers, the falsified documents, everything was sent to the appropriate authorities." Robert remained in a corner of the room, his tense posture revealing the internal conflict that consumed him. His revenge plan had worked perfectly, but the price was greater than anyone could have predicted. "What happens now?" Eliza asked softly, still monitoring Rebecca's vitals. The scientist was getting stronger by the hour, her body slowly breaking free from years of forced sedation. "Now," Rebecca replied, her voice gaining strength, "we've made up for lost time. And more importantly, we've resumed the research the right way." William approached his birth mother's bed, still processing the reality of having her back. "The treatments you developed, they could have saved so many lives." "They still can," Eliza interjected, her eyes shining with professional hope. "With the original files and Rebecca's knowledge, we can resume research following all ethical protocols." Robert let out a bitter laugh. "What about Ashworth Enterprises? The stock has already plummeted 60% since the news began to leak." "The company needs to be rebuilt," William replied, glaring at his not-brother. "This time, on solid and ethical foundations." An FBI agent entered the room, interrupting the conversation. "We need statements from all of you," he informed. "And Dr. Mills, there is a specialized medical team waiting to transfer you to Massachusetts General Hospital." Rebecca shook William's hand. "Don't leave me alone again," she whispered, the fear of 2 decades of isolation still visible in her eyes. "Never again," he promised, feeling the weight of that promise in every syllable. Eliza was organizing her medical records when she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Her soft moan attracted William's immediate attention. "The baby," she murmured, a protective hand on her belly. "I guess all this stress—" Robert stepped forward, genuine concern crossing his face for the first time. "She needs a hospital." "I'll handle it," William declared, already pulling out his phone. "Nathan, I need the medical helicopter now. We have a pregnant woman in need of urgent care." As they waited for medical transport, snow continued to fall on Burlington, covering the tracks of police cars and ambulances. Rebecca watched her son and Eliza with discerning eyes, recognizing in the gestures and looks exchanged between them something that went beyond doctor-patient concern. "You love her," she said softly to William, as Eliza was examined by paramedics in the hallway. "From the first moment," he admitted. "But now, with Robert's baby." "True love does not shy away from complications," Rebecca replied, years of silent observation having sharpened her perception. I've seen how she looks at you, even now, even with all this going on." The sound of helicopter blades interrupted the conversation. Within minutes, a professional medical team took over Eliza and Rebecca's care. William found himself torn between the two most important women in his life. "Go with her," Rebecca insisted, seeing her hesitation. "I'll be fine with the medical team. We have so much time to recover. But right now, she needs you." Robert observed the scene with a complex expression. "Take care of her," he finally said to William. "Take care of them both. I need to deal with the consequences of my actions." In the helicopter, flying over the snowy Vermont landscape toward Boston, William held Eliza's hand as she breathed through another contraction. "I'm sorry," she whispered between controlled breaths. "You should be with your mother." "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Rebecca understands. She always understood, even when she couldn't express herself." The fetal heart monitor kept its steady rhythm, reassuring amid the chaos of the last few days. Below them, the lights of the cities began to dot the gathering darkness. "What happens next?" Eliza asked, her voice revealing more than concern for her medical condition. "When all the dust settles." William contemplated the question, feeling the weight of the latest revelations, the truths exposed, the lives forever changed. "We rebuilt," he finally replied. "Not just the company, but our lives. Together, if you want." She squeezed his hand in response, words unnecessary between them at that moment. The helicopter began its descent toward Massachusetts General Hospital, where a new phase of their lives was about to begin. Massachusetts General Hospital was buzzing with activity when the helicopter landed on its heliport. A medical team waited with 2 stretchers, one for Eliza, one for Rebecca Mills, who would arrive soon in another helicopter. William watched helplessly as Eliza was taken to the obstetrics ward, her contractions now more frequent. "Mr. Ashworth," called Dr. Lauren Martinez, head of obstetrics, "we need to do a full assessment. The stress of the last few hours could have triggered premature labor." William nodded, his mind torn between Eliza and the imminent arrival of his biological mother. Nathan appeared in the hallway, his laptop under his arm and a serious expression on his face. "The company's shares continue to plummet," he reported in a low voice. "The press is having a field day with the revelations. We need an official statement." "Later," William replied, his eyes fixed on the door Eliza had disappeared through. "Now we have more important priorities." As if to confirm his words, Robert appeared at the end of the hallway, still wearing the same clothes from the confrontation in Burlington. His face showed signs of exhaustion and something else, remorse perhaps. "How is she?" he asked, keeping a respectful distance. "Being evaluated," William replied, studying the man he had believed for so long to be his twin brother. "Why are you here, Robert?" "It's my son," he said simply, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "Regardless of everything I did, all the lies and manipulations, that baby is innocent." A nurse emerged from the exam room, interrupting the tense conversation. "Mr. Ashworth, she's asking for you." Inside the room, Eliza was connected to monitors that recorded her vital signs and the baby's heartbeat. His face was pale, but there was determination in his green eyes. "The contractions are slowing down," she reported, trying to smile. "Dr. Martinez says it was a false alarm. Extreme stress can cause Braxton Hicks contractions." William let out a breath he hadn't even realized he was holding. "Robert's here," he said softly, watching her reaction. Eliza closed her eyes for a moment. "He has a right to be. This baby is part of him too." "What about us?" William asked, finally voicing the issue that had been hovering between them since the beginning of this entire saga. "After all this storm passes—" "Mr. Ashworth?" a nurse interrupted from the doorway. "Your mother just arrived. She's asking for you." The dilemma was written all over his face, torn once again between the 2 women who meant everything to him. Eliza squeezed his hand. "Go," she said softly. "You've waited 25 years for this moment. I'll be fine." On the 4th floor, Rebecca Mills was being installed in a private suite, surrounded by state-of-the-art medical equipment, an irony not lost on William, considering that many of these advances were based on his stolen research. "William," she smiled when she saw him, holding out a shaky hand. "How is Eliza?" "Stable," he replied, sitting down next to her bed. "The baby is fine." Rebecca studied his face for a moment. "You truly love her, don't you? Even though you know she carries Robert's child." "From the first moment I saw her," William admitted, "but the circumstances—" "Circumstances are only temporary obstacles when love is real," Rebecca interrupted, her voice carrying the wisdom of years of silent observation. "All that time in the clinic, even sedated, I could feel when it was Harrison or Robert visiting me. The touch, the energy. Some things can't be faked." A soft knock on the door revealed Nathan, still with his laptop. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. The board is demanding an emergency meeting, and—" he hesitated. "Robert is asking to speak to Rebecca." William felt his muscles tense, but Rebecca placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Let him in," she said. "There are truths that need to be told, wounds that need to be healed." "He is sure?" "He's both victim and perpetrator in this story," Rebecca responded. "Harrison manipulated all of us, in different ways." When Robert entered the room, the air seemed to grow thicker. He remained close to the door, as if afraid to approach it. "Mrs. Mills," he began, his voice unusually hesitant. "You wanted justice," she added, "but he chose the path of revenge." "I didn't know how to handle the truth when I found out," Robert admitted. "My whole life was a lie. My supposed brotherhood with William, my place in the family." "And now?" William asked, closely watching the interaction. "Now?" Robert let out a humorless laugh. "Now I have a baby on the way, a company in ruins, and the weight of all my choices to carry." News of the Ashworth Enterprises scandals spread like wildfire across Boston, dominating the headlines of major newspapers. On the 4th floor of Massachusetts General Hospital, William watched the city through the picture window, the first rays of the rising sun painting the horizon in shades of amber. "Stocks are down another 15% since last night," Nathan informed him, handing him a coffee. "Investors are panicking, and 3 board members have already resigned." "Let them resign," William replied, his thoughts divided between the monitors recording his mother's vital signs and the room 2 floors below where Eliza rested. "We will rebuild with people who share our values." Rebecca, who had pretended to be asleep, opened her eyes. "My research files. Is there still a safe copy?" "All copies are protected," Nathan confirmed, "and authorities are already investigating every case of unauthorized testing that Harrison conducted." A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Dr. Martinez, still wearing her lab coat from the night before. "Sorry to interrupt, but Eliza is asking about you, William. And—" she hesitated. "Robert is also in her room." William felt his heart tighten. The complexity of the situation, his love for Eliza, Robert's baby, the revelations about his real family, sometimes seemed too great to bear. "Go," Rebecca encouraged, noticing his hesitation. "Nathan can stay with me for a few minutes." In Eliza's room, the tension was palpable. Robert was by the window, keeping his distance from the bed where she was resting. When William entered, they both looked in his direction. "The doctors say I can be released tomorrow," Eliza informed, her voice tired but firm. "The baby is stable, but I need bed rest for the next few weeks." "I've provided an apartment," Robert said, surprising them both. "On Beacon Hill, near the hospital. It's the least I can do, after all." "Robert," Eliza began, but he raised a hand, cutting her off. "I'm not trying to redeem myself or buy forgiveness," he explained. "But this baby, he deserves a better start than I got. He deserves parents who are honest with each other and with themselves." William watched the man he had believed for so long to be his brother, seeing true regret in his eyes for the first time. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying I know how you feel about Eliza," Robert replied, looking straight at him. "I always knew, even before I found her diary. And now I know that she has feelings for you too." Eliza gasped softly, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "Robert, no need to say anything," he continued. "I will assume my responsibilities as a father, but I will not stand in the way of something that should have happened from the beginning." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway, a nurse bringing the results of Eliza's latest exams. Robert took the opportunity to leave, stopping briefly at the door. "William," he called, "take care of them for me. Do it better than I would." When they were alone, William approached Eliza's bed, taking her hand in his. The heart monitor showed the baby's calm and regular heartbeat. "He's right," Eliza said softly. "About us. About everything." "I should have said something sooner," William admitted. "Before Robert, before all this. But I was so afraid of losing you, of losing the friendship we had." "And now," she asked, her green eyes searching his, "with all these complications, with everything that happened." "Now I know that some truths can't wait any longer," he replied, leaning down to gently touch her face. "I love you, Eliza. Through all the lies and manipulations, that has always been the one constant fact in my life." Silent tears streamed down her face. "Even with Robert's baby?" "This baby is part of you," William replied with conviction, "and any part of you is precious to me." The morning sun finally overcame the clouds, pouring golden light through the hospital window. Outside, Boston began another day, unaware of the drama unfolding within those white walls. But for William and Eliza, it was as if the world had stopped, focused only on that moment of truth so long delayed. "We will rebuild everything," he promised, "the company, our lives, our history, this time based on truth and trust." A week after the events at the hospital, autumn painted Boston in shades of red and gold as William led an extraordinary meeting at the main office of Ashworth Enterprises. The boardroom, once dominated by stark portraits of Harrison and past executives, now featured only bare walls, a symbol of the ongoing transformation. "The numbers are worrying," admitted Nathan, projecting graphs that showed the precipitous drop in the company's shares. "But we have a unique opportunity to rebuild." Rebecca Mills, still recovering but determined to participate, occupied a place of honor at the table. Her presence caused a buzz among the remaining executives, the dead scientist whose work had been the unrecognized foundation of the Ashworth Empire. "I propose a complete restructuring," William began, his firm voice echoing through the room. "Starting today, Ashworth Enterprises will become Mills Ashworth Biotechnology. Our priority will be to resume Dr. Mills's original research following all ethical protocols." Rebecca smiled softly, decades of stolen dreams finally finding redemption. "The original protocols can be adapted to current technological advances. With a dedicated team and adequate resources—" "Resources we no longer have," interjected Gregory Parker, one of the senior directors. "Stocks have plummeted 70% since the revelations. Investors are fleeing." "Then we will find new investors," declared a voice from the door. Eliza entered the room, leaning on a cane, a consequence of the forced rest during her pregnancy. Stanford Hospital just expressed interest in a research partnership. William instinctively got up to help her, but she made a gesture indicating that she could manage on her own. Her strength and independence, even in moments of physical vulnerability, were part of what had made him fall in love with her. "Dr. Bennett is right," Nathan added, opening a new file on his laptop. "We've already received 3 investment proposals since we announced Dr. Mill's integration into the research team." The meeting continued for hours, detailing restructuring plans and new research protocols. When he finally finished, the sun was setting over the Charles River, casting golden reflections through the office windows. "How are you really?" William asked Eliza when they were alone, noticing the tiredness in her eyes. "The baby is fine," she replied, patting her now more prominent belly. "The doctors say the worst is over, but—" She hesitated. "But?" "Robert asked to meet with me tomorrow," she revealed. Want to discuss arrangements for when the baby is born." William felt his heart tighten. Despite Robert's apparent acceptance of his relationship with Eliza, the situation was still delicate. "Do you want me to go with you?" "No," she replied softly. "This is something I need to resolve with him alone. As complicated as it is, he is the father of my child." Rebecca appeared in the doorway, leaning on a nurse. "Sorry to interrupt, but William, we need to discuss something important regarding Harrison's old records." "Go," Eliza encouraged. "I actually have a prenatal appointment." In the office that once belonged to Harrison, Rebecca looked through a series of old documents. "I found this in the files Robert recovered," she said, holding out a yellowed folder. "These are records of other experiments, in other facilities." William felt his stomach drop as he read the documents. How many lives did Harrison destroy in the name of progress? "The question isn't how many he destroyed," Rebecca replied, her voice carrying the weight of decades of forced observation. "That's how many we can save now by doing things the right way." A soft knock on the door revealed Nathan. "I'm sorry, but I thought you should see this." He turned on the television on the wall, where a news report showed Robert Ashworth leaving a police station. According to sources, Robert Ashworth voluntarily confessed to his involvement in the company's financial embezzlement, the reporter narrated. In a deal with authorities, he will provide crucial evidence regarding the illegal activities conducted under Harrison Ashworth's watch. William looked at the image of Robert, the man he grew up believing was his twin brother, now a lonely figure facing the consequences of his choices. He's trying to do the right thing, in his own way. Sometimes redemption begins with a single step in the right direction, Rebecca commented, her own story of perseverance echoing in her words. William's phone vibrated, a message from Eliza with an ultrasound image. Below, her simple words carried a world of meaning. "It's a girl. I thought I'd call her Rebecca." In that moment, watching the sun set over Boston, William felt that despite all the challenges ahead, they were finally building something true on the ruins of the lies of the past. Mills Ashworth Biotechnology would be more than a company. It would be a legacy of truth, ethics, and hope. The autumn wind blew through the grounds of Massachusetts General Hospital as Eliza waited for Robert on the wooden bench next to the small artificial lake. Her 6-month-old belly was now pronounced beneath her maternity dress, and she felt the restless movements of her daughter, little Rebecca, as she'd already begun to call her in her thoughts. Robert arrived punctually, wearing a simpler suit than usual, the deep circles under his eyes revealing sleepless nights since his confession to the police. "You look fine," he commented, keeping a respectful distance. "The nausea finally passed," Eliza replied, indicating the space next to her on the bench. "And the exams show that she is developing perfectly." "Her," Robert repeated softly, a tentative smile appearing on his lips. "A girl." "Rebecca," Eliza confirmed, closely watching her reaction. I thought it would be appropriate." "It's perfect," he replied, his voice cracking with unexpected emotion. "To honor the woman Harrison tried to silence, William's real mother." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I came to discuss how we're going to make this work." While talking about joint custody arrangements and parenting responsibilities, across town, William and Rebecca faced their own delicate meeting at Mills Ashworth Biotechnology's temporary office. "Records show 3 more facilities," Rebecca explained, spreading documents out on the table. "Places where Harrison conducted unauthorized experiments. We need to find these people, William, or their families." "Nathan is already working on it," William replied, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "But some records were destroyed when Harrison realized he was being investigated." "Maybe I can help," a familiar voice sounded from the door. Diana Ashworth, elegant as ever in her Chanel ensemble, entered the office. It was the first time she had met Rebecca face to face. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Diana, the woman who had raised William believing he was her son, stared at the woman from whom Harrison had stolen him. "Lady Ashworth," Rebecca greeted politely, her posture tense. "Please," Diana replied, her voice shaking slightly. After all, I think we can dispense with the formalities. She turned to William. I found this in Harrison's personal safe at our house in Newport. He held out an old folder, the pages yellowed with age. William opened the folder carefully, his eyes quickly scanning the contents. These are complete records, he murmured. Names, dates, locations. I didn't know, Diana said softly, unshed tears shining in her eyes. About you. About the experiments. Harrison kept it all a secret. But now that I know... She took a deep breath. I want to help fix what he destroyed. In the hospital garden, Eliza and Robert had reached an agreement on how they would proceed after the birth of little Rebecca. William has been amazing through all of this, Robert admitted. Better than I've ever been. He has a huge heart, Eliza agreed, patting her belly, and infinite capacity for forgiveness. Something you clearly didn't get from Harrison, Robert commented with a bitter smile. Maybe it's the influence of Rebecca's genes. Eliza's phone vibrated, a message from William informing her of Diana's surprise visit and the newly discovered documents. Things are falling into place, she murmured. Not everything needs to be destroyed to be rebuilt, Robert mused, rising from the bench. Sometimes it just needs to be reorganized, with new foundations. Back in the office, Diana had sat down, her hands shaking slightly as she held a cup of tea. Harrison is negotiating a deal with prosecutors, she reported. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he will reveal all the details of the illegal experiments. Too late for redemption, Rebecca commented, her voice carrying the weight of decades of injustice. Maybe, Diana agreed. But it's not too late to do the right thing. That's why I transferred all my shares in the company to you, Rebecca. It's your right. It always has been. William observed the interaction between the two women who, in different ways, were his mothers. Uma had raised him with love, even under Harrison's lies. The other had resisted decades of confinement, never giving up hope of one day revealing the truth. Her phone buzzed with a photo of Eliza, her and Robert in the hospital garden, a genuine smile on their faces as she showed something on her phone, probably the latest ultrasound. The message read, "Making peace with the past to build a better future." The afternoon was advancing over Boston, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the office windows. Diana and Rebecca continued talking, decades of secrets and hurts slowly being untangled. William realized that sometimes true family is not just one determined by blood or legal documents, but by the bonds we choose to create and nurture. We're going to turn Mills Ashworth into something that really makes a difference, he declared, gently interrupting the two women's conversation. Not just in business, but in the lives of people affected by the mistakes of the past. Diana and Rebecca nodded in agreement, united in a common purpose greater than their personal differences. Outside, Boston continued its frantic pace, oblivious to the small revolution being planned in the temporary office of a company undergoing transformation. The dream began, as it always did. William saw his biological mother through a glass wall, trying to reach her, but this time he woke up with a smile. Rebecca was no longer trapped. She was free, alive, and helping to shape the Ashworth family legacy into something meaningful. The winter morning in Boston carried the distinct smell of snow in the air as William walked through the halls of Massachusetts General Hospital. Today was the day. Eliza had gone into labor in the early hours of the morning, and little Rebecca was about to make her entrance into the world. "How is she?" he asked Dr. Martinez as soon as he arrived at the obstetrics ward. "Progressing well," the doctor replied with a reassuring smile. "Robert is with her now. She asked to see you two." Inside the birthing room, Eliza breathed through a contraction, Robert holding her left hand as he monitored the timer on his cell phone. When William entered, his green eyes lit up despite his discomfort. 6 minutes break, Robert informed, his voice betraying a mixture of anxiety and expectation. The nurse said it's almost time. The last few months had transformed them all. Robert, after his confession to the authorities, dedicated himself to helping with the investigation into Harrison's irregular practices. Diana and Rebecca had developed an unlikely friendship, united by their desire to right the wrongs of the past. And William and Eliza, well, They had finally found their way to each other. Mills Ashworth partnered with Stanford today, William commented, trying to distract Eliza between contractions. The first research protocol will begin next month. Mom would be proud, Eliza replied, referring to Rebecca, who everyone now affectionately called Grandma Mills. Another contraction interrupted her, more intense than the previous ones. 5 minutes, Robert announced, his hand crushed in Eliza's grip. The following hours were a mix of intensity and waiting. Snow began to fall outside, covering Boston with a white blanket that seemed to purify the past. In the hallway, Rebecca and Diana waited together, sharing coffee and old stories, rewriting their own family narrative. "It's time," Dr. Martinez finally declared, after examining Eliza. "Who's staying for the birth?" There was a moment of hesitation before Robert spoke. "William should stay. His voice trailed off slightly. "He will be as much a father to this girl as I am." Robert's decision surprised everyone, but it reflected how much he had grown in recent months. His quest for revenge had turned into a genuine desire to do the right thing. William took Robert's place at Eliza's side, their hands clasped together as she endured the final contractions. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he whispered in her ear. The following minutes were intense, full of effort and determination, and then, at 11:47 a.m. on a snowy Thursday morning in Boston, little Rebecca Mills Bennett Ashworth entered the world with a loud, healthy cry. "She's perfect," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face as the nurse placed the little bundle in her arms. William watched mother and daughter, his heart overflowing with love. The baby had Eliza's green eyes and, surprisingly, dark curls reminiscent of Rebecca Mills. Robert was the first to enter after the initial procedures. His face softened at the sight of his daughter, and for a moment all the complications of the past seemed to melt away like the snow outside. "Hello, little Rebecca," he murmured, gently touching his daughter's little hand. "You have a lot of people who love you, you know." Rebecca and Diana entered next, completing the unusual family circle. The baby passed from arm to arm, receiving blessings and promises of unconditional love. "She carries the future in her name," Rebecca commented, holding her granddaughter reverently. "A future built on truth and love, not lies." Nathan showed up at the door with a huge bouquet of flowers and news from the office. Mills Ashworth shares had risen 15% after the Stanford partnership was announced. But at that moment, numbers and business seemed distant and unimportant. "I promise to be better," Robert said softly to his daughter as he picked her up again. "Better than Harrison. Better than I've been so far." William wrapped an arm around Eliza, watching the scene. The path to get there had been tortuous, marked by painful revelations and long-buried truths. But now, in that hospital room in Boston, with the snow falling softly outside, they were more than a reconstituted family. They were a promise that love, when true, can overcome any obstacle. "Welcome to the world, Rebecca," William whispered to the sleeping little girl. "Your story begins today, and I promise it will be written with love and truth on every page." Snow continued to fall over Boston, blanketing the city with promises of new beginnings. At Mills Ashworth, a new era of ethical research and medical advances was about to begin. And in that hospital room, an unlikely family found their own definition of happiness, proving that sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones we choose to create, nurture, and honor with love and truth.